Multi-species entanglements are all around us, various organisms in various settings and ecosystems linked together and shaping each other's lives and deaths. In the Anthropocene, as humans drastically affect climatic and ecological processes, these engagements can take on new forms or generate significant impacts on numerous species. This panel will be the first of two. We have a subsequent panel dealing with this topic towards the second half of the afternoon. The panel will include 3 presentations, followed by a discussion and Q&A. You are more than welcome to write down questions and comments in the chat box during the presentations. Please also write to who you're addressing the comment or question. Our first presenters are Clara Mancini from the Open University UK, and this is a paper she's written with Daniel Metcalfe from the Technion and Orit Hirsch-Matsioulas from Haifa University. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share my presentation. Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction. It's great to be here, and today I'm presenting as on behalf also of my colleagues Daniel and Orit. Okay, so visionary urban architects are developing imaginative designs for future cities in which built structures and lush vegetations interweave to create wonderfully inviting spaces, promising to provide perfect environments for life to thrive. Indeed, who would not want to live in such environments? More importantly, though, who would be welcome in such spaces? The United Nations have estimated that global urbanization will continue at least until 2050. This means that for at least another 30 years, cities will become larger and more complex and will face increasing challenges with regards to their ability to sustain urban life. This raises the question as to how urban development can be made sustainable. One answer to this question is the creation of smart, sustainable cities, which integrate advanced information and communications technologies within sustainable urban architecture infrastructures. Digital sensing technologies, cloud computing infrastructures, middleware architectures, and wireless communication networks would be used to monitor and analyze urban phenomena and to plan and manage access to resources and services to meet sustainable development goals. Smart sustainable cities aim to leverage such technologies to meet the environmental, economic, social, and cultural needs of their citizens with equity and inclusivity, ensuring that citizens have equitable access to the resources, services, and opportunities they need to participate in society and enjoy a high quality of life within a healthy and pleasant environment. However, by all accounts, the aspiration of smart sustainable cities for an equitable and inclusive environment of enjoyment of the benefits afforded by urban living seems to be fundamentally limited to humans. Although some species have notoriously adapted to living in urban settings where food and shelters are to be found, they are often perceived and treated as a nuisance or a threat, accused of carrying disease, of damaging property, and of imperiling human safety. When conflicts of interest between humans and animals arise, they are often resolved by dispatching the animals. Except for a few protected species, animals' presence in cities is usually tolerated only if they are seen to add value to humans' urban experience without affecting humans' interests. And for those animals whose presence is tolerated, cities are often inhospitable, whether by design or by indifference. However, the integration of animals' interests into city planning and practice could yield benefits for animals and humans alike. For example, because green spaces that provide habitats for animals also benefit human health, because encounters with wildlife enrich human experience, and because biodiversity is important for the preservation of the ecosystems that sustain human life. Should therefore smart sustainable cities explicitly acknowledge animal city dwellers and endeavor to meet their needs with equity and inclusion. We suggest that smart cities should move beyond notions of anthropocentric sustainability towards the notion of multi-species justice. And in this regard, we refer to Martha Nussbaum's capabilities approach to multi-species justice. Departing from an anthropocentric theoretical tradition in social justice theory, Nussbaum argues that a sound theory of justice should extend beyond the human realm to address related issues involving non-human animals. For Nussbaum, animals are agents capable of dignified existence with corresponding needs for flourishing and related goals that they actively pursue to achieve species-specific capabilities to which they are morally entitled. These include staying alive, maintaining one's bodily health and integrity, experiencing sensory and cognitive stimulation, enjoying nurturing emotions and attachments, setting goals and plans, forming intra- and interspecies affiliations, and managing one's social life, having control over one's environment, and safeguarding one's territorial integrity. Rather than insist on the equal fulfillment of relevant capabilities across species, Nussbaum's approach specifies a minimum threshold for their adequate fulfillment, removing the need to concede equality between humans and animals as a precondition for pursuing animal justice. Nevertheless, this still requires that some animals, including humans, non-essential capabilities be limited to enable the fulfillment of other animals' essential capabilities. Grounded in the capabilities approach to multi-species justice, we propose that a just multi-species smart city should recognize animal dwellers' entitlement to a dignified and flourishing existence according to their species needs, and afford them with equity and inclusivity the opportunity to pursue biological goals relevant to their capabilities. In relation to the needs identified for smart sustainable cities, animals' goals might pertain to building, inhabiting, and traversing structures and spaces corresponding to environmental goals, to acquiring and managing resources corresponding to economic goals, to forming and maintaining social groups corresponding to social goals, and to gaining and transmitting knowledge and skills corresponding to cultural goals. To pursue their environmental, economic, social, and cultural goals and take advantage of the opportunities that their surroundings provide, animals need to be able to interact with their surroundings effectively. And in order to take advantage of their surroundings' affordances, they need to be able to make sense of the elements of said surroundings within their unveld, that is, within their world model. This is informed by the animal's biological goals and by their capacities of perception and interaction. Therefore, sense making requires that the elements of an animal's surroundings be perceivable to them and responsive to their behavior. For example, glass surfaces are difficult for birds to perceive under certain lighting conditions, giving them the illusion that they can fly through, which often results in them crashing to their death. Birds might also perceive that buildings' windowsills afford perching on and might wish to exploit set affordances, only to be prevented from interacting with those structures effectively by deliberate interventions such as spikes. In neither scenario does the city enable the animals to achieve goals that are biologically relevant to them. The former because it does not allow them to make sense of barriers that prevent them from safely traversing space. The latter because it prevents them from taking advantage of an affordance that would provide them with a place to rest, socialize, and nest. Conversely, structures such as species-specific wildlife crossings enable animals to make sense of a passage and to safely traverse an otherwise dangerous space to reach places where they can find food, build shelters, socialize with conspecifics, and develop their territorial knowledge. According to the animal's natural preferences, behaviors, and sensing capacities, wildlife crossings may take different forms, from narrow suspended bridges for squirrels and other rodents, to dark damp underpasses for amphibians, to wide vegetated overpasses for larger mammals. Of course, our proposed model raises difficult questions. For example, how to determine what capabilities and goals different species value and when these are adequately fulfilled. How to identify species to be considered and how to decide which species needs to prioritize. How to reconcile conflicting needs among species and determine ways to compensate for lost capabilities. How to negotiate existing local relationships, values and benefits and beliefs, and animal justice principles. How to unambiguously communicate relevant affordances to different species. To address these questions, the just multi-species smart city could develop gradually and iteratively by leveraging information and communication technologies throughout its development cycles. Notwithstanding the importance of protecting monitored animals, including their security and privacy, large amounts of data could be collected using various sensors to help shed light on species presence, assemblages, behaviors, and preferences for feeding, nesting, and socializing, as well as the affordances and dangers the city presents for them. Applications supporting nature-based citizen science projects could enable human citizens to take part in the collection of ecological data. This might increase public acceptance of animals' presence in cities and encourage a sense of shared responsibility and a culture of collective caregiving. The use of big data and artificial intelligence for decision-making in smart cities, however, raises issues of bias and fairness because the source of the data, how it is collected, when and by whom, might strongly influence decisions and outcomes. It is important to be aware of these risks and seek ways to overcome them. For example, where species-related data is missing, indirect representation could be sought through proxies, such as representative species or relevant parameters of ecosystem health. Considered data processing approaches could help interpret the data in ways appropriate to local urban contexts. For example, data regarding animals' behavior could be combined with existing ecological and ethological knowledge to define species-specific goals based on what local animals seem to value. Because cities are novel ecosystems where animals' behavior tend to vary from the behavior of wild populations, a context-specific assessment is needed to understand what a site does or should afford them. This could help determine to what extent different capabilities are currently met and identify the best trade-offs to afford the minimum threshold for all as much as possible. Where species groups have been severely disadvantaged by human activities, compensatory measures could be identified. Insights generated and requirements identified through data processing could inform the ideation of design solutions that take into consideration multi-species perspectives and the social-cultural characteristics of the local context. These solutions could include smart mobility regulation systems that allow safe crossing for different animals, sporadic feeders that respond to periodic changes in resources, temporary reserves that protect animals during more challenging periods, adaptive light systems that reduce light pollution, or even transformative infrastructures such as buildings that shift their shape to respond to the needs of various species. Implementation of these solutions could vary in form and scale and include infrastructure features embedded into the design of the cities, such as green corridors, animal crossings, ponds, and vegetation, or influence planning decisions, such as where and in what ways the city should expand or regenerate. In this respect, a most interesting aspect of smart technology is its ability to generate agile and adaptive solutions, which might allow the city to shift and respond to the needs of multiple species over time and space. As the city collects data and generates insights and decisions based on species-specific capabilities, it should communicate its affordances to different animals in a clear and species-specific way to allow them to make sense of their environment and interact with it in a meaningful way, whether facilitating or limiting certain activities. For example, a dangerous road should communicate that it does not afford crossing in some areas while affording safe crossing in others. Different animals' perception of the city's affordances is largely unknown to us humans. Therefore, the process of collecting data, decision-making, and communication must be iterative. Ongoing monitoring could help identify where affordances are misperceived and gradually correct them, ultimately leading to reduced conflicts. Adaptive systems could use artificial intelligence to gradually develop a better understanding of the perceived affordances of different species and communicate them effectively. Communicating to people information regarding the presence and behavior of the animals around them might also help render their hidden and sometimes enigmatic presence in cities more visible, awakening biophilic sentiments and helping shape environmental attitudes and behaviors. In conclusion, the human species is but one among countless threads weaved through an infinitely complex web of life that sustains all species. Blinkered by anthropocentric interests and empowered by anthropocentric technology, we have profoundly disrupted its delicate structures and severely undermined its functioning. There is now an urgent need to use our technology to find sustainable forms of multi-species coexistence to prevent the ecological collapse that threatens all animals, including humans. Cities are ecological microcosms, both metaphor and metonym, of the way in which we coexist with the multi-species individuals who inhabit the planet. As urbanization continues to increase, sustainable smart cities must recognize the citizenship of multi-species dwellers and afford them equitable and inclusive opportunities to attain their basic capabilities. A technologically supported multi-species coexistence could soften the boundaries between familiar and unfamiliar, fostering greater care for wild animals while preserving their independence and providing greater autonomy for domestic animals while maintaining their human relations. This could redefine our relationships with other species, not only within, but also outside cities. Beyond improving urban living and urban environment, designing just multi-species smart cities could provide a model for achieving ecological justice and sustainability for the planet as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clara. That was very interesting. We will now turn to Surayyn, Uthaya, Selvan.
Did I stop sharing the screen?
Yes, please. And Surayyn has been working on a project alongside Yasha Grobman and Shany Barath, and he will be speaking on their behalf.
2 seconds to share my screen. Make all of you tiny. Oops. Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Surayyn Uthaya Selvan. I'm a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Architecture and Town Planning at the Technion, and I'm honored to present on behalf of our team with Professor Dr. Yasha Grobman and Professor Architect Shany Barath, the topic multi-species building envelopes from human-centered to ecological inclusiveness. Now, we begin by introducing this statistic that was also mentioned in the previous presentation by the United Nations that back in 2018, that there will be a 68% increase in the global urban population by 2050. Now, this statistic is especially important because what this means is that more people will move into cities, which requires cities to provide more urban living spaces, and this causes rapid urbanization. Now, rapid urbanization, however, comes with a cost, especially in our global temperature through the urban heat island effect, for example, which increases the global temperature because of heat retained in cities. But more than this, rapid urbanization also affects the living conditions of other urban organisms through habitat and biodiversity loss. Now, because urbanization affects the urban environment and urban ecosystems, multidisciplinary knowledge exchange between the fields of architecture and ecology is necessary to create well-informed design solutions. But where can we implement these solutions efficiently for ecology and architecture? Well, when we observe cities, we find that there are vast urban surfaces, but fragmented green spaces to host ecology. So looking at the urban surfaces to intervene will provide ecologically driven solutions that is fitting. Now, currently, many forms of sustainable design solutions, such as vertical greenery systems and green roof systems, have been introduced and have been proven to improve the quality of our urban environment. There also has been commercial and experimental investigations of integrating animal habitation into building design through facade components. However, these design solutions are often human-centered and are mainly focused on vegetation as an ecological component. Animals and microbial ecosystems are often left out of the picture. In addition to that, design often looks at buildings as discrete solutions, either focusing on building walls or building roofs. Whereas for us to holistically consider ecology into design, we need to observe the cityscape as a homogeneous landscape to consider ecological connectivity in urban environments, which will then enable us to be more ecologically inclusive with our design considerations. These notions are addressed by the concept of multi-species building envelopes, which creates a living space within the building envelope to facilitate the cohabitation of humans, animals, plants, and microbiota in an integrated ecosystem. The design of these envelopes is investigated in the Ecolopes research project under the Horizon 2020 FET Open Grant, with a consortium that includes the Technical University of Munich, Vienna University of Technology, University of Genoa, the Technion, Studio Animal Aided Design, and Technion Europe. However, there is a challenge in considering multi-species because we also need to consider the multiple requirements of humans and the ecological communities. Not only that, but we need to integrate contextual information from the abiotic and the built environment as well. This complexity requires a multi-criteria approach to design. From the literature review that we conducted and are finalizing, we realized that there were very limited precedents on implementing a multi-criteria approach for multi-species design. In addition, existing literature were primarily focused on humans and vegetation and did not fully consider the multi-species approach. Therefore, it was necessary for us to understand what are the multi-criteria complexities of designing building envelopes for multi-species cohabitation. We investigated these complexities through an architectural design studio conducted with third-year students and a digital fabrication seminar with final-year architecture students in the Technion. What we will present today are selected student works to reflect the challenges and opportunities of multi-species designs. We will begin with the architecture design studio, where the students were required to design a residential building located in Tel Aviv. Most importantly, they were required to integrate a facade system for multi-species cohabitation. With advice from socio-ecologist Professor Dr. Asaf Schwartz from the Technion, students identified local plant and animal species in the area. And they created a network of interrelations between the ecological communities. The students then conducted research on the requirements and biology of their chosen plant and animal species. Once the students had a good understanding of their chosen species, they were then required to design parametric facade modules in relation to their research. Some students looked at structural modules to further enhance human-nature interactions, while some students looked at biomaterials to facilitate ecological processes. Then, using computational design software, students conducted environmental analyses on their proposed buildings and mapped the appropriate locations for their chosen species and the correlated facade modules. Then, with a bit of design and ecological rationalization, such as considering the building structure and ecological connectivity, students proposed their final residential building designs that integrate man and nature through the built environment, and redefine their perspectives on cohabitating with nature in the outdoor and indoor environments. They also looked at the surrounding landscape and even looked at interactions in the internal spaces of their buildings. We now move on to more practical investigations through the digital fabrication seminar that is currently in its final stages. The main objective was for students to design and fabricate facade tiles to encourage multi-species cohabitation. Similar to the design studio, students identified multi-species of their choice and digitally designed facade tiles using computational design tools to create living environments for their chosen multi-species. Then, the students experimented with various digital fabrication tools to facilitate the design and fabrication of their proposed tiles. Students were then required to physically fabricate a full-scale model of their proposed design using concrete casting. As a result, each group of students have a physical prototype of a multi-species facade tile that they've explored from design to fabrication. In architecture, this meant that they explored computer-aided design to computer-aided manufacturing to produce physical prototypes through research by design. Students experimented with complex geometries to design their tiles and brought in individual ecological knowledge. Using a variety of fabrication techniques such as 3D printing, CNC milling, and laser cutting, they were able to conceptualize and rationalize their multi-species designs. Students were also inspired by their surrounding environments and created designs that were also directly inspired by naturally occurring geometries. As the seminar is still ongoing, we are currently in the final stages of fabricating the molds of their proposed facade tiles. But as you can see, students came up with a variety of geometrical decisions to facilitate their chosen species. Through the design studio and fabrication seminar, we were able to explore the integration of the multi-species approach into design through theoretical and applied research. This feedback further strengthens our understanding of the opportunities and complexities of multi-species design. Some of the challenges that surfaced were how architecture is still primarily a human-centered discipline. Now, this may be attributed to the limited availability of ecological knowledge for design. And finally, the computational complexity of multi-species design also poses a challenge for designers to integrate ecological aspects into design. However, with these challenges, there are opportunities to encourage ecologically inclusive design thinking in academic settings, which allows students to creative explore their design solutions. This perspective shift will also encourage multidisciplinary collaboration with experts outside of design disciplines, which will then prompt computational developments to support the complexities of multidisciplinary collaboration. Before I end, I would just like to acknowledge the hard work and inspiring research of the Ecolobes Consortium that drove these academic investigations. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Surayyn. Now we have our third presentation, Begiram from Himachal Pradesh University and the project he's working with Deepak Sharma.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, let me just share my screen. Okay, is that visible to all of the participants?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so good afternoon. In fact, good evening to all of you in India. It's 6:30 p.m. So good afternoon and good evening to all of you. And today, I want to discuss about the topic, which is basically, one second, guys. Okay, the performance evaluation of the management of community dogs in Himachal Pradesh, a case study, which is a state in India. And I'm co-authoring it with Dr. Deepak Sharma, which is my PhD supervisor as well. I'm pursuing PhD from this university, Himachal Pradesh University in India. And this is basically a very big concern in India that community dogs, or we can primarily say the stray dogs, which are roaming the streets, they are basically neglected, and the diseases they are causing, they are mostly neglected in India. And just introducing that the community dogs, basically they live in close proximity with the humans, and therefore they have frequent interaction with the humans. And with this interaction, there are a lot of conflict as well. So let me go through you with the facts, which are very concerning. There are about 62 million community dogs in India wandering on roads, specifically. This is a big number. And apart from their existence and dignified right to life, their interaction with humans has resulted in danger of getting a tropical diseases. And most likely the disease is rabies, which is very, very big concern for human health. In India, specifically, there are about 20,000 rabies cases of total 59 world cases, which accounts about 36% of total world case of rabies. Due to which Asia, or India basically, is also known as rabies capital. This is a very big concern for the world as well. So therefore, to protect humans from any form of tropical diseases caused by these community dogs, it is very necessary or essential to strictly adhere to the policy framework and animal birth control rules which are formulated by the Government of India. Otherwise, all the countries in the world. And moreover, let me talk to the very important thing that was basically mentioned in the Constitution of India as well, that Article 51AG specifically says that we need to have compassion for the living creatures, be it any creature, any animal on this earth, on this planet. Specifically, we are talking here with the dogs. And the present study basically evaluates the real issues in the local management of community dogs in India, specifically in the city of Shimla. I think you all have heard, or few of definitely have heard about Shimla, which is basically the capital of Himachal Pradesh, which is a state of India. And why community dogs? Basically, why this term is basically used here in place of stray dogs? Why we don't basically use stray, the word stray here, which is basically a derogatory word here. So let me tell you about the facts that Chandigarh administration, a city, MC Chandigarh, basically it proposed concern while considering a case that came up before the Punjab and Haryana High Court, which is basically the states of India. And courts have said that the homeless dogs would now be called as community dogs and they will not be called as stray anymore. And the plan was put forward by advocate Tanu Vedi before the division bench of Justice Ajay Kumar Mittal and Justice Anupender Singh Grewal at the High Court. And this was a very big and very necessary initiative, which was basically to give social justice as well to these community dogs. And the basic concern about human-animal conflict is that their interaction with the human, cohabitation with the humans, and coexistence with the humans. And this basically causes the conflicts between human and animal. Animals in animals, we are specifically dealing with here the community dogs, which are in a frequent existence as well as interaction with the human beings. And one of the major health threats which is caused by the community dogs is human rabies that we have discussed earlier, and this fact we have discussed earlier as well. And there are many other diseases, many other infectious diseases which are caused by these community dogs, be it rabies or any other infectious disease. And methodology for this study that I have used here, that the municipal corporation Shimla has been selected as the area of study, and the Shimla having a populated city which has a number of community dogs about 24,000 almost, which makes Shimla a focal area for the incidences of dog bites. And dog bites basically are very big concern as well, and this results to the rabies cases as well. And there have been some areas which have identified after inquiring public officials and after doing some groundwork dealing with it, which has a greater number of dog bite cases. And these area includes the name of the area is Sanjoli, the mall, Sabji Mandi, which is a Hindi version, and in English we can call it a vegetable market. Okay, in Hindi it's called as Sabji Mandi. And these are some prone areas. Now talking about some data, the demographic data of Shimla city as per census 2011, as there is no data, no updated data of 2021 census, which is not out yet. And Shimla city, if you talk about the population, it has this much of population, and this is all the demographic data you can see on your screen. But importantly, when I went to the data collection, data was collected through the primary as well as secondary methods as well. So secondary method I used here was from the public officials, data reports, and other research papers as well. And secondary data was collected from various publications that I have told you. And whenever we talk about the primary data, and primary information has been collected through an interview schedule, which was administered to the concerned officials of municipal corporations, Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, that is SPCA, Resident Welfare Association, animal welfare groups, and animal lovers as well. And there were some focused interviews conducted consisting of 6 to 8 participants from line officials and the local people, and the results were very surprising, and the findings that I found here was very surprising as well. And let's talk about the medical facilities that this city, that this municipal corporation provide. The city of Shimla has 2 major medical hospitals, which are Indira Gandhi Medical College, that is IGMC, and Deen Dayal Upadhyay Zonal Hospital, that is also known as Ripon. And these two hospitals handle the most of the cases of dog bites in Shimla city. And these hospitals are located within the city and about 5 kilometers of distance from each other. Now, what are the rules of local authorities in the management of these community dogs? Basically, in Indian Constitution, there was an amendment, that is 74th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, which has a 12th schedule in it. And it says that it has mentioned that it must be the function of municipality to prevent cruelty to animals in urban areas. So that's why it is very important to study that how the municipal bodies or the local authorities are dealing with these community dogs and the management of their population. So the population control programs of these communities' dogs must be executed in a just and humane manner, keeping in view the provisions of the Constitution of India as well. Now, what are the important concerns that I have told you earlier? That 24,000 bite cases annually was reported in Himachal Pradesh, which is a very big concern as well. And it is more than 150. It is basically more than 150 in Shimla city every month, the dog bite cases. Therefore, there is an urgent need for the efficient and effective management of community dogs in Shimla city. That's where the study becomes more significant. Now, there are various animal birth control measures, and there was a project named Animal Birth Control Anti-Rabies for Stray Dogs in Shimla and the surrounding villages. It was executed by the Stray Dogs Birth Control Society, Shimla Municipal Corporation. And what was the objective? It was to make Shimla rabies free. And this project was started in 17th of October 2006. However, this program was stopped by 2011 by some internal causes. And a number of stray or abandoned dogs were sterilized during this program, which helped in the population control of these animal or dogs. And apart from this, community dog sterilization was also there, and which was very important to control the population. And there were so many provisions which were provided in the provisions of Prevention of Cruelty, Capture of Animals Rules 1979, as well as there was another act, that is Animal Birth Controls Act of 2001 in India. And there was a lot of efforts made to control the dogs population, and which was very necessary because the number of bites were increasing day by day. And at local level, various municipalities have done a great job, including Chandigarh, Tamil Nadu. Your Shimla is basically lagging behind because there were some problems of resources and some other issues. Now, there is an important adoption policy in Shimla, that is Community Dogs Adoption Policy in Shimla, which is basically was an effective measure taken by the MC Shimla. It was taken as an immediate solution to control the population of dogs, community dogs. And in October 2021, the MC Shimla initiated a stray dog adoption policy under which the people who adopt the community dogs in city will get 100% concession on garbage lifting charges, which was basically put by MC Shimla, along with free registration and vaccination of adopted dogs. And one thing I forgot to mention here, that free parking facility to the adopter. And apart from these facilities, they will also get free parking that I have mentioned here. Till now, more than 200 community dogs have been adopted by the residents of the city under the adoption policy. And this is a great thing. And this is basically really a great initiative taken by the city administration. It will definitely help in management of community dogs, which is basically a need of the hour. Now, what is the significance of this study? The significance of this study is basically to reduce the population of community dogs. It is very necessary to know the causes why the MC or the administration is not basically being successful in controlling the population of dogs. And this study will definitely this study has definitely inquired some basic causes which are basically there and which need to be studied very in depth. And this study also revealed some facts or some major concerns which are very important for the policymakers to be adopted. And this study has its own importance in understanding and evaluating the implementation of these measures, which are basically for the dog population. And we have tried to analyze and evaluate the policy implementation of Municipal Corporation Shimla, Himachal Pradesh, India, for the management of community dogs. Now, what are the findings and what we found in the field? That is an important point here. The research was conducted to find out the management of community dogs in Shimla NC. There were some aspects which came into light after doing research study. There was a concerning number of dog bites in Shimla, specifically in some selected areas, which include that I have mentioned earlier, the mall, Sanjoli, and the areas of Sabji Mandi or the bus stands and around the bus stand. And main reasons for this number is garbage and the availability of food in open spaces where these community dogs breed and grow. The number of community dogs is increasing day by day due to inadequate measures taken by the local authorities. That was also a concern there. And there were many loopholes in the functioning of municipal corporation while managing these community dogs. And there was no, this is the big flaw, that there is no proper census of these community dogs. The number is not exact, and which makes it difficult to plan in order to manage their population. While interviewing veterinary health officer, VHPO, it was found that there is a lack of resources and manpower, which makes these authorities inefficient in the management of community dogs. So resources and the staff must be there, and there are limited dog holding capacities. Along with this, there are more bites in category 3, which is very very big concern, because this category creates a lot of harm to the person, and which is more vulnerable to the dog bite victims. The management of community dogs is being taken in an ignorant way, and due to which dog bite cases are increasing in the city. And concerning point about is that there is no special helpline number for an emergency case of dog bite, which may be rabid, and the vaccination is available in the 2 hospitals that I have mentioned here, which were major hospitals in the city. And these are some dog bite cases that you may go through. And these are there were basically almost 3,000 dog bite cases from January 2021 to April 2022, as per the official resources. And these are the dog bite categories, which are 940 in number, which are category 3 mostly, and which is most vulnerable, and which may cause a lot of risk of rabies to the victim, which is basically dog bite victim. And these are some numbers. And policy suggestions, talking about policy suggestions, I must say that the research finding makes it very clear that there are many loopholes in the management of community dogs in city of Shimla. So in order to make the city healthy and harmonious, the local authorities should take some effective measures, and they should provide more and adequate resources for an effective management of community dogs in city. And there should be proper and systematic census of community dogs. Main cause of their breeding is the garbage dumps, and these needs to be fixed first. And this is also concerning for human health as well. And there should be a special helpline number which is missing there in case of emergency of dog bite, so that the victim of dog bite can avail immediate assistance from the hospitals like first aid and ambulance or vaccination facilities. So while concluding, so human beings are too busy with their own interests, and the issues related to the community dogs are still not getting much attention. The dog bite cases in Shimla city are concerning and need some effective measures to control the population of these community dogs. And the dog bites leads to a fatal disease, that is rabies, which has about 36% of the world deaths alone in India, that we have discussed earlier, and which is not getting much attention in India. And we need to control the increasing population of community dogs so that they can be managed well and their conflicts with humans can be resolved. And it is the function of local authorities to manage all the issues related to the community dogs, but it should also be duty and obligation of every citizen to cooperate with the government in managing these issues and contribute individually accordingly. So thank you very much, guys. So that was all I need to present.
Thank you, Beggy, very much. If you could stop the sharing, that would be great. And I am now very happy to introduce cultural and urban anthropologist, Professor Fran Markowitz from Ben-Gurion University, who will comment on the presentations.
Thank you very much for having me. Can you hear me? I've unmuted. Yo, perfect. Daphna, I will ask you, please show me 5 fingers for 5 minutes and 2 fingers for 2 minutes. I oftentimes think I have nothing to say and then I run over. So let me begin. Again, thank you for this opportunity. Let me see if I can read this. To respond to the set of papers dealing with multi-species sites of engagement in the Anthropocene. I'm doing this as an urban anthropologist who has worked in New York City and Chicago in the US, in Jerusalem and metropolitan Beersheba in Israel, in Moscow in Russia, and in Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, where I saw a gradual return of urban wildlife to the city after it had been under siege during the wars of 1992 to 95. War is not healthy for humans, and it's not healthy for animals either. I'm also bringing my own background as an urbanite who has always felt great love, responsibility, and affinity, dare I say, kinship, to the animals with whom I have shared living spaces over too many decades to count. Let me give you some background. I grew up in Stuyvesant Town in Lower Manhattan. Although I did not know it at that time, the complex sat on 80 acres or 18 city blocks, which were raised in a massive urban development scheme to make way for a new, pleasant, and affordable neighborhood. Initially proposed in the early 1940s, it was ready for occupancy in 1947-48, and preference was given to veterans who had just returned from service in World War II. Wikipedia reports that Frederick Ecker, the president of the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company that underwrote the project, said that the complex would make it possible for New Yorkers, and I quote, to live in a park, to live in the country in the heart of New York City, end of quote. Stuyvesant Town consists of 11,250 apartments housed in 110 12-story buildings. Stuyvesant Oval, with its fountains and seasonal Christmas trees, is at its center, and there are two large parks, one in each part of the complex, among the red brick apartment towers. Its design was heavily influenced by the modernist towers in the park theory advocated by Swiss-French architect Le Corbusier, in which residences consist of tall apartment buildings situated within a lush park-like environment. Now here's what I remember. Lovely flowering rhododendron bushes outside the entrances to each building and a perfectly cut green lawns surrounding building clusters. Shiny steel chains blocked access to the grass, and signs and security guards reminded us children, back in the day, to stay off the grass. There were lots of squirrels and lots of acorns from the oak trees, many species of birds, primarily sparrows and robins and pigeons, and in late fall and winter, we might spot the shocking red of cardinals and hear the loud caws of blue jays. But pets were not allowed in Stuyvesant Town, although my dad had a 30-gallon fish tank and we had a pair of parakeets named Beauty and Betty. Later, a year or so before we moved to a larger apartment in Brooklyn, we snuck in a cat. While Stuyvesant Town was meant for families, children were forbidden from playing in the grass. We hula hooped and roller skated on concrete sidewalks and swung and dangled from metal monkey bars, hopscotched, ran and danced in concrete playgrounds. We also fell a lot, and everyone in my generation has scars on their knees from that concrete. If we were caught on the grass, we were apprehended by a security guard and often escorted home to our parents, where we were duly chastised and punished. Sometimes we envied the squirrels. In later years, as a graduate student in anthropology, I reflected back on my childhood days in Stuyvesant Town and wondered, paraphrasing Levi Strauss, if its constructors and overseers had set out to domesticate the savage mind, or, as Foucault put it, discipline and punish us to become ideal middle-class citizens. After all, most of Stuytown residents were barely second-generation Americans, mainly Italian and Irish Catholics, and about 20 to 25% Ashkenazi Jews. I had a few friends who went to St. George's Episcopal Church, which was rather mysterious and perceived as elitist in the eyes of Catholics and Jews. There were still slums across Fifth Avenue, and along with ethnic and bohemian whites, Puerto Ricans and Black people lived there. Many had pets, and their trees and sidewalks had curb your dog signs. Some lawsuits, and 60 years later, Stuyvesant Town's demographics have altered somewhat, and the 2010 US Census shows its residents as 74% white, 3.6% African American, 0.1% Native American, 12.5% Asian, and 6.7% identified as Latinos of any race. Just as important, the chains surrounding the grass have disappeared, and small pets are allowed with special permission. This backstory informs my discussion of the 3 presentations we have just heard in this panel on multi-species sites of engagement. I am certainly not the first analyst to draw parallels between human policies and practices of racial segregation and human-animal segregation in urban and suburban environs. When nature and culture do exist in park-like urban environments or suburban gated communities, we might ask, for what purposes? Who benefits? Who prospers? Which species are included and which excluded? I got this flyer today in my mailbox, and it says, on my side, it says, are you suffering from irritation? Call us now. And on your side, it says something like, do you need secure and efficient extermination? And you can see the species, pigeons, rats, and cockroaches. So for which species are included and which are excluded, and why? These questions undergirded my reactions to the papers, which I will discuss in the order in which I read them, which is not the order in which you heard them. So I viewed the slides and their subtitles that constitute the presentation on multi-species building envelopes first. And I formulated my questions while pondering its goal of planning for and designing eco-inclusiveness in the city. The authors began, as you heard, by stressing the fact that urbanization continues apace into the 21st century, where now 55% of the world's population already live in cities, and that number is expected, or that proportion is expected to increase to 68% by 2050. They, the authors of this presentation, like many of us, decry the loss of biodiversity and propose use of ecological data collection and through computer-generated models and methods to advocate for constructing small urban places and spaces that include vegetation and attract non-human animals, the envelopes. Altering building materials and designs, they suggest, will make these envelopes into quotidian, ecologically divergent or diverse communities, not exclusive parks or gardens. Their presentation highlighted 2 projects that illustrate the feasibility of building and maintaining such envelopes. It sounds great, but I ask, how will site selection and funding work on the local and state level? How will consensus be won from the human community to, for example, lessen the use of glass to make their buildings more friendly to birds? Yesterday, Jeff Sebo, in his keynote lecture, suggested that humility and responsibility need to go hand in hand together with the amazing technological and research abilities of architects and community planners. I would like to know more about these aspects of the Envelopes project. The next paper that I read, Justice in the Anthropocene Towards Multi-Species Smart Cities, has an international and multidisciplinary set of authors and presents a grander, more theoretical and ethically charged take on some of the same issues as tackled by the first team. As we just heard, Martha Nussbaum's capabilities approach to multi-species justice underlies their approach to developing small, sustainable cities. Here, I want to remark that the notion of justice is, of course, a human concept, and so too is the evaluation of capabilities. I just wonder, though, whose notions of justice are being invoked as the groundwork for smart cities. Of course, they are the product of human thought and almost necessarily anthropocentric. Why is justice the key word here? And it was not interrogated at all throughout the paper. How does it connect to the word citizen, which also was barely analyzed? How does justice, or why does justice, operate as the rationale for the highly sophisticated urban concepts, places, and spaces that are so beautifully outlined in this paper? I am particularly touched by the author's humility in pointing out that their delineation of, for example, on-ground, above-ground, and underground wildlife crossings generates difficult questions regarding the reconciliation of different needs among species, including human dwellers who might not want their residences to attract pigeons, insects, and small mammals, that is, rats. And I wrote that before I got this brochure. Their proposed solution of gradually building these kinds of environments, coupled with citizen participation, and I asked parenthetically, are other species citizens too? And how do they manifest or demonstrate their citizenry? Are they passive citizenships? How are they agentially citizenships? Does this fall within their capabilities? These are questions I would love to have further pursued or analyzed in further work on these issues. So flexible plans and policies and continual communication all sound promising for, and I quote them, achieving ecological justice, of course, which I would want better defined and deepened. What is ecological justice? End of my parenthetical comment. And sustainability for the planet as a whole. Feasibility, well, that's another paper. After their educational campaign and more climate change summits. And now to the final paper about man's and woman's best friends, dogs. Deepak Sharma and Beggy Ram have introduced us here at the 2022 Hasi conference to an actually existing multi-species community. Shimla, which they describe as a beautiful city covered with forests having diverse vegetation, home to 1,067,578 humans and several thousands of stray or community dogs. Shimla is not unusual, since the authors point out that India, with its, ready for this, population of 1.4 billion people, also contains about 62 million homeless dogs. The numbers are overwhelming. You do the math. And they tell us that the numbers are increasing, and so too are problems, especially as regards public health and the scourge of rabies, an incurable disease. I want us to back up here for a moment to focus attention on Article 51A of the Indian Constitution, in which it is explicitly stated that compassion for animals is mandated, and on the Animal Welfare Board of India Acts and Rules, which the authors tell us is overseen and implemented nationwide through state and regional and urban governments. Although there is no statement of animal rights, there are a list of entitlements which are humans' responsibilities to provide. Community dogs must be given shelter, the ability to feed themselves, to live in peace with no harm done to them, and to provide, quote, veterinary urban hygiene. Compassion for non-human animals is a stated value. All this notwithstanding, each year thousands of dog bites, and you saw the charts, are reported and treated, and India has the highest rate of rabies in the world. The authors provide an evaluation of the actually existing policies and ask what more can be done. They focus on two policies that seem to be effective, and I won't go over them because you already heard them eloquently explained. The rabies inoculation campaign, which was unfortunately discontinued, and now also the adoption campaign, which I guess is progressing. The initiatives of free garbage pickup and free parking in the city, as well as free inoculation and registration of the dogs, are very compelling. That's a good point to look at. Now, can you think of other initiatives like dog parks and shelters? What about distribution of garbage cans that have lids that cannot be opened? What about improved garbage pickup and dumping? Enclosing the landfill, enclosing the dumps. What about a public information campaign about interacting with dogs? Yeah, there are thousands of dog bites, but you have to get pretty close to a dog for that dog to bite you. And finally, what about reforestation? If Shimla is located in the forest, have there been any efforts to try to bring the dogs into the forests and encourage them to stay there, or at least some of them? Unlike the multi-species smart cities paper, which ended on an upbeat, Sharma and Ram conclude that, and this is in the version I got, human beings are too busy with their own interests. The issues related to the community dogs are still not getting much attention. So what do you have to say about these two diametrically opposed conclusions? What do you have to say about justice and compassion, about local and global responsibilities to ourselves, to others, to the planet? Thanks for letting me talk. Bye.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. And both the way you tied the presentations together and the questions you raised. Would you like to respond to Professor Markowitz? I mean, who would like to start first? Yes, Clara.
Oh, me?
Well, you unmuted yourself, so
well, I was just
you basically volunteered.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you so much for your response to our presentation and our paper. I think I guess the issue, how much time do we have to respond? Should we keep our answers quite quick, short, or how,
well, maybe
how would you like us to respond? So,
2 to 3 minutes, something like that.
okay, so I think the biggest issue you raised is what does justice mean, and what, you know, is a human concept. I mean, the fact that justice is a human concept has been disputed, in fact, by researchers like Mark Beckhoff, who have argued and sort of shown that animals have a concept of fairness and justice in their own way. But the other thing, I guess, is to interpret perhaps in this context the word justice as entitlements. It's more in the sense of entitlements, things that animals would want to have, just things similar to things that humans would want to have to live and flourish. There is an interesting distinction that Nussbaum makes between the Rawlsian approach to justice, the John Rawls approach, which is that it is a social contract between more or less equivalent of equal individuals who agree among themselves, and therefore this would exclude animals because, you know, on the assumption that there cannot be such agreement. And she says we need to decouple the question of who makes the justice rules and who are these for. So in that case, you know, like babies, or the argument she makes is that little, young humans or people with cognitive sort of divergences would be excluded from a social contract. But we ought to develop an idea of justice as basic and multi-species as possible, as sort of universal as possible, that also caters for them. And so she applies the same, she just extends that to animals as well. So that's sort of, I mean, we didn't have space to explore all these in the paper, but this is sort of the theoretical grounds on which we build. The more fundamental point, I think, here is to just question the idea that human justice is, or what we consider justice, what puts humans at the center, is actually just. So it's, I think the value of appealing to, of referring to these notions of multi-species justice is to dislodge or this question whether, what we consider justice, and whether this should be actually extended, this idea should be extended beyond the bounds or the boundaries of humanity, not as compassion, because compassion is a prerogative of one species towards another, but as the entitlement of the other. So that's why the notion of justice is particularly interesting here, because it shifts the focus from the one who gives to the one is entitled to receive. So I know I'm out of the time, but I don't know whether that responds in any way.
Yeah, it does indeed, because I was thinking about both compassion and responsibility, and these are mandated from humans to give. And if what you're saying is that the necessity of giving is not what you want to emphasize, but the idea of entitlement, I think maybe that would have been, first of all, it would have been great to have had explicated in your talk. And then secondly, perhaps the idea of entitlement should be developed along with justice, and show how you decided to come up with this concept of justice. Because as I said, it's the first word in your title, and it's never really explicated as to why that word was chosen. So thank you for your brief rejoinder.
Thank you.
All right, Surayyn, would you like to be next in just responding to Professor Markowitz?
Yes, just really quickly also, thank you so much for that really wonderful summary. I think it really synthesizes all the points that we tried to encapsulate. From your summary, the one thing I took away from that also, and it's a question that we are asking ourselves, is also the idea of human acceptance. And the human's relationship with nature is very personal, and human's relation with architecture is also very personalized. And so that's why with this idea of the multi-species building envelopes, we try to incorporate a lot of multidisciplinary knowledge and try to bring in people who actually understand the socio-ecology aspect of our design solutions. And I think that's where we as architects and designers can learn a lot more from as well. We still don't know what kind of animal species are preferable. It's all very personable, but hopefully once we start to disseminate this idea, we will also learn across time.
Excellent.
Can I just say two things? As I was reading your piece, I was thinking about the outrage in South Tel Aviv some years back, as so many human migrants from Africa used that neighborhood as their gathering space and started to move in deep numbers to vacant apartments. And I guess, I was thinking that there was an outrage that a human population of unfortunates had come in. What about justice for refugees? What about compassion for their fellow human beings? And then I started thinking about, who is Anat? You're the one who talked about the cuteness factor and why you decided to make a study that was not of puppies and kittens. These issues just popped into my head as I was reading your work, focusing on Tel Aviv, where property values are outrageously high and people invest, and yeah, good luck.
Peggy?
Thank you very much for the feedback, ma'am. And we all know that this sector is basically not being explored so much because it is an ignored sector. The population that you already know that India has a lot of population to deal with, and after that, if we have 62 million stray dogs or community dogs that we are saying them, the possibilities of exploration, possibilities of basically the social justice to these community dogs are there, but we need to explore more and we need to work a lot on this. And I think you said about public information campaign should be there. And ma'am, yes, we are trying at our university level as well. And we need to work a lot of more. And thank you for your suggestions. And thank you. I have noted all the points here and definitely work on them. And one question is there, I would like to answer Orit, that the question is how stray or community dogs are perceived in the local society and culture. Does changing their social category as community dogs reflects the cultural change towards these dogs, or is a new category supposed to create a cultural shift? Definitely, it will change the perspective. And first of all, if you talk about the justice to all our communities that are coexisting with our society, human society, definitely we need to change first the perspective that we have towards them. And obviously, if we change our perspective in a positive way, definitely we can talk about their justice, their rights. And the stray word is a derogatory word here, and definitely we need to change it. And first of all, if we change our perspective towards them, definitely we can work for them, work for their justice, their rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Begi. Shlomet added an additional question to Orit's question. Apart from the municipal authorities' duty to deal with this issue, are there any attempts to address the problem in the educational setting? And she doesn't know if she missed it, but I think you did not really talk about that. You're muted, Begi.
Sorry, no, I didn't hear you.
Well, Shomit is asking also about the educational system. Is this something that they're incorporating into the educational system to try to deal with the problem?
Actually, in educational setting, municipal authorities basically not dealing in that area. We have specified functions for the municipalities, and the
There seems to be an unstable internet connection.
basically this is basically yeah, definitely. And we only with the research, with our higher educations, we can study them, and there is no specifically authority of the municipal corporation to deal with that, and we at our own need to research on that for those issues, related issues.
Great. And Anat is asking Surayyn, how do you imagine this building will operate as a single project in a less friendly environment? Did you consider starting off an entire multi-species city instead of just one building in an existing city?
Well, I will open the chat to read that as well. Okay, thank you for that question. I think the reason that we chose the building envelope is also the issue of scale. We want to truly understand what the impact of one building can do, and then see how it can facilitate the processes in the surrounding environment. And then we can start to place more buildings and start to understand their networks, not only within the relationship of the building, but also within the relationship of several buildings, and then slowly build up the scale, as we saw with the multi-species cities that was presented in the first presentation as well.
Well, thank you all very much. I mean, this was a really fascinating discussion, and I think we got a lot of different perspectives on that. And if you would like to continue the conversation, I would like to encourage you to look at the website. There's the abstract book where you can find contact information for everyone. And if you have problem reaching anyone, you can also email our HASI conference email, and we can forward it to whoever you want to continue the discussion with. I would like to thank everyone for the stimulating panel, both the speakers and Professor Markowitz for offering such an incredible discussion. Please join us in 15 minutes or 17 minutes for Laurie Gruen's keynote talk, Why Ecofeminism Now?